You're about to watch a clip from the Videomaker Podcast. If you want to see the whole episode, click the link in the description. Should I shoot RAW? And we're talking about RAW video here. If you're talking about photos, by the way, the answer is almost always yes.
Yeah, the file size addition of RAW, and of course your ability to capture a JPEG alongside in photos makes it kind of a no-brainer. Yep. You're not really making that much data unless you're shooting on A7R4, to which I actually created more data shooting photos than I did video. But that was because I was shooting like super high-speed continuous files at the highest quality. But I digress. RAW video, on the other hand, is becoming more and more available at a cheaper price point, right? So, I mean, crap, $1,200 is what you can get the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. You can get 4K RAW, right? And not all RAW is the same, so that's one thing. But I'd have to say, just in general, most people don't need RAW.
Yeah, unless you're like making a narrative film, you want to do a lot of color grading, or you're using like a RED, which has just an incredible RAW format.
Yeah, which is very efficient, which is not typical for RAW. So the RAWs that are out there, we have Blackmagic RAW, which is their kind of RAW. We have Cinema DNG, which is really in essence just a lot of photos, and then they go together as a video. We have ProRes RAW, which of course is actually more efficient than ProRes by like 50%. So the files are smaller and you can get more image data. And then you have Red Code RAW. I don't think there's Cinema Raw Lite. I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's what RAW from Panasonic.
Ooh,
I'm not sure. Or ARRI. ARRI definitely has their own, but those are high end. And if you're shooting on an ARRI, you're shooting
Lumix
on a
RAW.
Lumix RAW. So you might need it. But here the big deal is, for me,
that's photos.
I shoot RAW far more often than I should. Most of the time, it's when I'm testing a camera, and I've found that by the time I'm done grading, if I didn't need the dynamic range from, this even comes down to log. I'd say log and RAW kind of somewhat go hand in hand, being that RAW is usually, it's raw image data, sensor data, so you're going to have no contrast and that kind of thing, so you're going to have to add a lot to it. But that if you don't want your production to take longer in post-production, then shoot with all the color there. It really comes down to how much time do you have after you're done shooting to publish. Yeah, exactly. You could add a third more time to your edit just because you have to grade everything. Not because you shot it wrong, you have to do a lot of work to get it right. It's just that you have to grade everything.
Yeah, to get it to be usable.
To be normal again, right? Just to be typical. So you're adding a step in your process. Now, that step is very robust and strong, and a lot of times you might need it. But what I would say is use it when you need it, and don't use it when you don't, if that makes enough sense. And
in a lot of cases, I think people are going to find that they don't need it most of the time.
Yeah, a producer that used to work here, Greg Olson, he works at the school at the local college here, and they don't have a storage issue or anything like that. They just have a time crunch, and they're like, no, we don't have time for the workflow of RAW. We shoot everything as we want to see it, and if we can't capture it that way because of limitations of dynamic range or whatever, we might switch to RAW for that shot and then grade to match that shot to all the rest of the ones we do. But you hardly ever stay in that. You would shoot it because the dynamic range of that scene was hard, or you had some other thing you needed to do, or what have you.
Now, what do you think of the approach of just like shooting everything in RAW and then settling on a LUT that you like and then just applying that in bulk?
You could do that,
and that way you can go back and tweak with the image if you need to.
It's all about data management. So really,
that's true.
If you have storage, cool, but terabytes of storage isn't going to get you far. I shot a project that shot three 3-minute videos. They were all interviews. I shot one interview it took about 2 hours to shoot the interview, and I shot a bunch of B-roll, probably about 40-50 minutes worth of B-roll for these 3 interviews, and the project was almost 3 terabytes. and that's to make 3-minute videos. 9 minutes total of edited content was 3 terabytes. And I guarantee you, if I didn't shoot that in RAW, and that was Canon RAW Lite, which is gigabit a second is the data rate. So that's, and so, if I would have shot that on the C200, which is what I shot it on in the H.265, I don't think I would have broke 500 gigs. I bet you I would have been under 300 gigs or smaller for that same project. And I ended up grading and spending a bunch of time grading when I probably shouldn't have. I'm definitely, I love RAW, and I love the latitude you have if you've made a mistake to correct it and all those kinds of things, but it's heavy to hold on to, so you might want to transcode. But like, that's what I think is, if your camera can shoot RAW, cool, use it when you need it, and don't when you don't. So use it when the situation, you pull it out and use it when you don't know how this is going to turn out, or I need a little more latitude, I need more dynamic range, because you're going to get those things from RAW. And usually, typically, you're going to get more color data information, right? So like RAW is typically 10 or 12 bit. So if you're doing that, then you're getting a lot more color than shooting at an H.264 or 8-bit file. But it's not worth the added time if your product, if the final video isn't, it really depends on your budget. You're shooting a narrative and you have a budget for storage and all those kinds of things, and you're going to need an archive and all that kind of stuff, and you have some money for do it. But
if you're a YouTuber, you're putting out a video a week
or every day or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it just doesn't make any sense. I think even
that's probably why so many YouTubers are shooting with their mobile phones.
Totally. Well,
super compressed image,
Yeah, and all you have to do is cuts, right? I mean, even weddings, unless you're getting paid for a high-end wedding, which totally is a thing, but that it's likely, you shot a wedding, a real-time event, and you had 3 to 5 hours of footage on one camera. That's so much data. I mean, that's just an incredible amount of data.
That's one of those things where if I was a wedding videographer, I would really try to avoid shooting RAW.
Yeah.
For that reason. Although I actually think there's something to be said about wedding videographers just not holding on to that old footage that is left on the cutting room floor. But
that's true.
But that set aside, if I was shooting a family member's wedding, I would shoot it at the highest possible resolution in RAW, just to maintain the most accurate representation of what transpired as possible.
Totally. And here's the thing I would say in that situation for weddings, I'd shoot log so I could get more dynamic range and I could grade, because likely you're going to do weddings tend to have a lot of rich color, and that's part of the look. Just like wedding photos are usually really heavily edited, so is your footage going to be. And so having that latitude and dynamic range, wonderful. But do you need to have the raw data? Maybe not. If I'm choosing between 8-bit, 10-bit, and 12-bit, being that 8-bit is H.264, 10-bit is H.265, and 12-bit is raw, I'm probably going to choose the middle of the road. I'm going to try to transcode that H.265 so my computer can handle it better. But that's like happy medium. Like 8-bit, if you shoot something wrong, like your exposure is bad, there's no recovering. What you see is what you get. You're really not going to be able to pull those highlights back. Your shadows are going to be dark or noisy. It's just the essence of it. But as soon as you set up to 10-bit, you have a little bit of latitude, and that's really nice to have. But do you need a lot of latitude? Well, only if the situation is so dynamic that you need that. Otherwise, be a good shooter and choose the right exposure for the situation.
Yeah, and I think that actually there's something to be said about, especially on less expensive cameras, shooting RAW could encourage a shooter to become lazy in a sense.
Totally. If I'm capturing, it's like if I had a 360 camera that shot RAW in some high resolution, I could have everything, right? Yeah, except for everything was shot through a wide angle lens. I mean, there's just so much stuff that you think, I'm going to do this so I can have a lot of options in post. And, really what you end up doing is just not making creative decisions as you go, and your art is going to suffer because you're not being deliberate on what you're trying to achieve. I would still always think it through and be deliberate. Whatever your choice is, it's not a wrong choice if you thought it through. It's the choice you've made. But I'd say 75% of the time when I'm shooting for my work, RAW is not going to be beneficial and not going to not going to add to my production. The stand up of me sitting here, or the A-roll of me talking to the camera, is not going to turn out any different because I'm shooting in a very well lit location with control over everything. I should have used the lights differently if I needed to shoot raw.
Yep.
Now I can shoot raw just because I have it on the camera, but what's the point other than making a lot of data and hoping that you're saving it for the future or whatever. Yeah, if it's for a personal project and that kind of thing, the big thing here though is, can your computer even handle it? And every single camera manufacturer has their raw footage to be able to download some footage from it. I know the Red has one for every one of their cameras, and in the different compression settings and that kind of thing. Get those, although you're not going to do anything, and just see how they play in your edit system. Because likely is you're going to want to use RAW as sparse as you can because it makes your computer really bogged down.
Yeah, so there's a lot of downsides to RAW certainly, and a few upsides, but the upsides are pretty big.
The upsides are great, and it's just, if you have the budget for it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but it adds to the cost in time to your edit and into your storage. Otherwise, yeah, go for it. I mean, if you're shooting on a Red though, you're always shooting RAW. I mean, I don't know why you'd ever.
Well, if you're shooting on the Red, you're probably not the person who's asking this question.
True, but like their RAW is so efficient that you don't have to make those choices because, cool, I have something that plays well, that is completely raw, that I can change the ISO in post, and
workflow is super easy.
Super good. Everything's really efficient in the way it works and everything. I mean, this isn't an advertisement for Red, but they do. I mean, I feel like the definition of raw for me is hanging on Red Code RAW, and everybody else is just a perverted version of that.
Well, I think it's the best, but I don't know if it's the definition in the sense that it is compressed.
It is, but RAW is just such a marketing term. It's like, is it sensor data? Is that what you're getting? Okay, cool. Red Code RAW can be uncompressed, but their compression is efficient enough that there's not a lot of loss for it.
Right. Once you get the uncompressed version, then you're back to the main problem of massive files.
So, but the cool thing is you have like 15 different amounts of compression. You can do 20 to 1. You could do 2 to 1. You can, there's so many, there's such a wide range of amount of compression versus like H.265. Yep. That's the amount of compression you're getting, So, it might, it's just one of those things that if you have all the resources to be able to play back and edit that stuff, and you have all the storage, RAW is always going to be better to start with, but it has all sorts of unforeseen issues that if you don't have addressed are going to be a pain in the butt to deal with.
Yep.